Salutations. It's an honor to be here with you all and present, the final makeup of Inconvenient Truths. Tipping the Scale of Transcendence is the piece that is finalized and the title that is bestowed upon it. And we're going to take a deep dive into why. So I just want to thank you all and those that were a part of this exciting project. It was truly an honor. So everyone that was working with Kamora for Kamora's Cultural Corner, and all the employees at the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center. You guys really impressed and really fueled my soul in creating one of my most exciting pieces, I think, to date, right? So, Harriet's Inconvenient Truths, I call it HIT, right? Rightly so, because I wanted to make sure that it had the impact that conversation had on me, right? And so it was a reciprocal effort that I think took place where I kind of served as a soundboard in a certain way, and almost like uh, a sponge, which I'll allude to like later on in this piece. But I think that we really gathered a lot. There was a lot there. I mentioned it before where I probably could have made a few pictures, but I tried to strategically and and with purity implore what it was that the main threads in our discussions and what took place, and hopefully you gain a sense that I was actively listening, and that is something that we can all be proud of, because I think that we are embarking upon a great measure of change and a great visual that you all really like fed into and steered the ship of. So I can't thank you enough. So, as we explore the elements surrounding Uncle Tom's Cabin and other areas within our discussion, without further ado, here we go. So, starting at the bottom with the cabin, right? So, the cabin serves as the cornerstone of the painting, hence why it's down in that bottom right hand. Is where the cabin is being flooded. There's a name plate for Henson, right? Of course, alluding to Josiah Henson, and we also have sprayed upon there as Uncle Tom, right? And it was very eye-opening and telling about how Henson used the moniker to market himself while he was going across different areas where he was talking about his life story, which he was the model for Uncle Tom, right? And so there's intentionality between the color, right, and being Uncle Tom, because we can see it in a negative light or with negative connotation. In this day and age, especially amongst African Americans and indigenous folk. So this kind of, brings it back to that root, right? And then linking with that and also being the same color is, war, right? Which is over the top of the band-aid that has civil. And we know that if being civil, if seeking civility when we're communicating with one another or voicing our opinions is like the highest bar, then that's a problem, right? um, you know, Maintaining poise is something to definitely be proud of, but it should set the standard. It shouldn't be what we aspire to achieve, right? And so it just shows how shaky it is when, the nation at this point, right, talking about back then, but also maybe talking about now, when being civil is um, the apex of who we are as human beings, then we might be on the brink of some change, right? That needs to take place in order for us to evolve. So hence why war is over there, and of course put together we got civil war, right? And then there's a tongue-in-cheek play on Harriet's work, right? So during the time where abolitionists and everyone that was looking for progress to end slavery, when their points couldn't get across, maybe until this point where Uncle Tom's Cabin was released. It just shows that the message is falling on deaf ears, right? And so hence there's an ear that's laying on the roof of the cabin, but it also symbolizes Harriet and her listening in, right? And really seeking some sense of empathy that might be there, in terms of being able to tell this story in such a passionate and vibrant way that got the message across. So much so that Abraham Lincoln coined her the quote unquote little lady that started the Civil War, right? And then of course she used the Bible to really flip the perspectives that people were thinking were who were at like the top as far as like piety and righteousness, really letting them know like, hey, you know, if you are silent during this during this time of recognizing what needs to change, then you're guilty as well. And I think she put that in folks' face when she created Uncle Tom's Cabin. Moving up, we have the train, which is carrying cargo with stages of challenging and tension, right? So inspiration is first, interpretation is second, and appropriation is strikingly last as the white caboose with a shallow X over the top. Along the train's travel are pieces of litter or literature, if you will, connecting to the body of water above, right? So those pages create these rippling effect, right? A ripple effect. The slices set on each of the shoulders, they actually come from the painting that we went through and that we observed, or one of which that we checked out during the workshop, right? And it stems from my great friend Andre Rochester, who, you know, metaphorically pointed to the inequality and inequities through dessert servings. So the slices that are set over on the left, they embody a one-way path which presents options on the unmarked headstones. So on that first one that's in the forefront, we can see that it's being marked with option number one, which is freedom, right? There's an X over it. In order to gain freedom at this time, it meant that chances are you had to risk your life, right? Or maybe your loved ones' lives in order to gain freedom. The second is the Underground Railroad, right? Same thing. You got to risk your life in order to gain freedom. This also ties in, of course, to that train that's going, right? And who's telling the stories of how folks are seeking their liberation and the value of that and what that really means, especially if you're coming from the perspective of the third headstone, which it says a black man, right? And so these unmarked graves that can be spotted right in our own backyard are symbolic of, you know, the people that sacrifice themselves in one form or another to help build, you know, what we see today and what we've become accustomed to over the years. And so there's, you know, parts of our Hartford landscape that can be recognized within here, and that gold, the gold building is linked with, you know, the one of the links of the choker necklace that are being broken from bondage, right? But we shouldn't overlook the impact and the connection that are the empire that we see today and how it was made and where it stands, right? And so that's over there on the left side. Now over on the right side, that has you know, green pastures, right? It still has dismantlement of those links of the choker necklace, but on this side is through like literature. There's an X through enslavement, or at the budding part of enslavement, which also is symbolized to break those chains, right? And then moving downward, we have these green books that are sitting on top of each other. One indicates that it is the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, and then the other other in front is kind of like a time warp, because it came up during our discussion, is the Green Book for Negro Travelers, right, which is buried behind, showing that connection, right, while folks were looking for safe havens in the Underground Railroad and along their travels, during times of enslavement. It was the same thing after, right, during times of Reconstruction, and even now, right, where folks are looking for these safe spaces in order to flourish, and find ways for them to express themselves and really come to grips with who they are and where they can be appreciated and valued. Lastly, that slice that's down there, it symbolizes an open book. So there's pages within there that converges into the sea, showing a rippling effect on one side, and then it kind of crashes ashore on the other. So in between these shoulders is the collarbone, right? And I think that this is probably the heart of our discussions, or a series of discussions. So we see the words on the Kit Kat that says somatic abolitionism. Um, and here, this area captures what that means, right? So it's a living embodied philosophy that recognizes and heals our bodies of the white body supremacy virus which infects us all. The collarbone bridges the bars, referencing Kit Kat conversations that manifest in our daily lives, but especially in environments where discourse is met with dissonance and discomfort, right? And that's really what the whole, um, you know, what the center really stands for. Is like, how do you navigate these tough conversations from people who might visit there with these glaringly different backgrounds, right? And how do you, help them, and how do you facilitate a conversation where people see it from a whole different side, or they're brought there for different interests, right? And so, we talked about Kit Kat conversations and then also softball conversations. So if you look upstream, you can see that there's a softball for the face of the watch or the clock that's there, right? And it's busting at the seams. And the reason why is because with softball conversations, they represent, just where pleasantry is paramount and easy, right? And where truth can be disguised. So we talked about the differences between politeness versus strategic conversations, and different approaches that way, where sometimes they can be misconstrued. And so we can also see that those hands of the clock are like stretched across the body, casting a shadow, right? And so it stands for one of the quotes that we often drew upon, and like, what does it mean for Harriet to be a woman of her time, right? And being, locked into this box of, what it means to be a female of this time, and the impact that she may have had from that stance, and what that may mean just from a human aspect, right? So when we go up a little bit further, we can check out A Tale of Two Harriets. So I alluded to it before, but now we're going to do a deeper dive. So this area represents, the dichromatic dichotomy, right? So this split of two people with representing two different complexions or tones, right? So, though they have these different features which represent different experiences, they also share some of them and aren't too far off from others. So on one side, it represents Harriet Jacobs. The other side represents Harriet Beecher Stowe. Okay. Now in the center, they shared the same mouth, right? It's a blossoming Uncle Tom tulip, or a double late tulip, which I found super cool because it it has these double sets of petals, right, that that overlap with one another. Now inside here, there emits this light. So they are able to eloquently express themselves, and beauty just radiates out of that. But in order to get to that point, there's some sacrifice and some recognition within those sacrifices that take place. All right. So when we look at the black crane over on the left is whispering into Harriet Jacobs' ear that everything is going to be okay, and that a change is going to come. Word of Sam Cooke, right? But that there's transformation that will take place. There's cranes like all throughout the Stowe Center, and I wanted to highlight a black crane, right? A Western African, ironically, crane, that's coming over, that's dropping these jewels and like letting, kind of giving Harriet Jacobs the understanding and the presence to say, okay, yeah, you're going through hell right now, but you'll get through this, right? And she wrote about that in her novel and her autobiography about like the horrific aspects of slavery, right? And she also sent some of that information over to Harriet Beecher Stowe, who didn't use it for Uncle Tom's Cabin, but used it for a derivative of that for the keys to Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? And so you have this super raw, authentic view from an actual former, an emancipated slave who really went through it and then also had the ability to write about it. It reminds me of like the Steve Bilko story, right, where his view was told through the lens of the person who was just recording it, right? And so a lot of this came up in conversation when it came to the authenticity and the purpose of being presented in this light. And so on the staying on the same side, if we look at the way that everything is being captured, and then follow that flow over to the opposite side, we see that there's a hummingbird that's whispering in Harriet Beecher Stowe's ear, and kind of has to carve through, and there's like black petals that are over there, right? But that just captures the empathy that she was able to pinpoint, and how that was able to be pollinated over on the other side. But that's not without having influence and talking to Josiah Henson, and then also maybe having some attributes from Harriet Jacobs herself in order to tell that story in such a captivating manner. So when we zoom in on these eyes now, and we look over on the left, we can see that Harriet Jacobs has a compass, right? And that compass, that eye, is labeled as the eye of truth, right? And so there's Sojourner and there's Truth, right? Which was another great influence when it comes to Harriet Beecher Stowe. On the left side the of the scales of justice, we have it's starting to kind of become decrepit, right? It's starting to weaken. That's where it doesn't hold a lot of weight, but there's tears that are pouring, right? There's water that's coming down the cheek. And then on the right side, there's blood that's coming down, right? And that's the heaviest sacrifice, okay? And that's something that is indicative and really represents what these what slaves went through, okay, and what people still are living with till this day. And those and that blood drips down, and it actually like feeds the color of the tulip that we just visited on the previous slide. Okay, now Over on the right side for Harriet Beecher Stowe, we can see that there's a mirror, okay? And this mirror represents, it reflects her son Charlie, who passed away. And that was really the catalyst that allowed Harriet Beecher Stowe to discover that sense, that deep loss, and relate to what slaves were going through, and how their families are being torn apart. And so the mirror reflects what she is observing over on the other side of this injustice, right? And she was able to harness this, capture this, and feel this, and that's why you have the tears that are that are dripping down her face on this side and feeding into the tulip. Also, I want to note that, I was going to create Charlie so that, you could tell that it was Charlie and that it was at least related to Harriet Beecher Stowe, but instead I wanted to leave it a little bit more ambiguous, and so that anyone can see their child in there, right? Or a loved one, someone who's young and that's vulnerable and that is filled with innocence and that had their life taken away from them, right? Or is being mistreated, right? And because that's how Harriet saw it, and she was able to relate to other people and be humble enough to understand what others might be going through. And I think that's what resonated when she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. So we have the caged birds up top, the caged birds quest. The key to compassion is empathy, right? As I just, dwelled upon a little bit in the last slide. So to get there, humility must be endured. The keyhole operates as an entry point to the crown and the mind. The crown is placed upside down because flipping our current scope of competence opens new dimensions. One side is sturdy and resilient, bearing turmoil, and the other is tarnished, dissipating in the sky, a sign of change. Carved in the upside down crown are the words courage, and it's all capitalized, right? Because it's bold, and curiosity, right? It's eloquently written in cursive, demonstrating the elusiveness that can come with trying to discover new elements in our lives. These factors do overlap with one another. Facing pain, grief, or the unknown can become hollow without a sense of curiosity. Being inquisitive without the willingness to address something wholeheartedly can be futile, right? So when you have both of them operating at the same time, I think that's when you have something that's sustainable, that's authentic, and that you should really go and embark upon. The birdcage is modeled from Stowe's room, right? And so it's a space that can be filled, or could be removing ideologies, schemas, and also frameworks that we become accustomed to living with. Both Harriets were courageous enough to absorb, process, and execute in immeasurable ways. They were open-minded enough to be able to tell their truths and also do it so with a sense of like grace and sturdiness, right? So one of the discussions that came up happened to be talking about authenticity of certain works, right? And so I was put on to the Birch Bark House, and how it mirrors what Little House on the Prairie was about, right? But it came from, quite different perspectives and different areas right within our nation, right? So we really talked about what intent may be there and how it could be perceived in the final product, right? And how we may come across when we're putting that out into the world after we really process and put forth, how we're going to articulate ourselves and how we're going to help facilitate and navigate these conversations in these difficult times. So the key is on the opposite side of the hair, because it's going to be hard to find in there, right? And that's something that's attributed to wanting to be curious, right? And to be able to uh, have the wherewithal to go past the surface and really find what it is that you're looking for, or at least being willing to go on a journey to search for this empathy. And then uh, that key also, you know, represents, folks trying to take the time in order to discover self. Okay, so after you have a certain level of self-awareness and you're going through somatic abolitionism, you're constantly self-evaluating yourself, and rightly so, in order to see how you're going to interact and engage with others, and to a point where you can, keep yourself intact, right? But also being willing to go out there um, and discover something, that's courageous, that's worthwhile, and that is of value, and that translates when having these conversations. So the routes of responsibility. So I just want to talk about how I use like real sponge up there as well. Um, just to kind of show how we can all have um, minds and methods of elasticity if we allow ourselves to, if we don't just stay caged into who we are and say, well, this is just how I operate, or I'm just here to like listen, instead of actually like engaging and exploring all these different dynamics that we embody, as human beings. So holistically, Harriet's Inconvenient Truths culminates a journey of self. It is designed to prompt key questions in our lives, seamlessly joining our actions to who we are. It hopefully harnesses critical notions like those developed in the workshop series. What are our individual responsibilities, and what are our responsibilities as a collective? So you may have to operate according to a particular mission or a particular vision, right? Like we have at the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center. But within there, what is our responsibility and how we connect with one another? Okay, you know their vision is to be in a world in which engagement leads to empathy, right? Then that key part is engagement. There has to be something that's reciprocal, where you're bouncing things back and forth in order to build, right? And then that empowerment can come out of that, and then you can eventually come for change for good, right? But it's not a linear path, right? Sometimes you might have to take different routes, in different ways, as seen between the river and the trains in this piece, or the train tracks, right? Sometimes you might have to climb mountains. Sometimes you might have to put in a lot of like labor in order to get there. But ultimately, it requires being courageous and also being curious to see this path through. So I feel like this painting is an opus that epitomizes both Harriet's sentient legacy, while paying homage to the notable contributors such as Josiah Henson, Harriet Jacobs, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and many other fallen soldiers and geniuses that really helped inspire her, and in turn inspires us all to do the great work that we're looking to do. And as Kamora, let us know, we always got work to do, right? We may see that the glass is half empty or half full. But regardless, we know that it ain't all the way full, and we got some more to accomplish, and some more connections and engagement to make, so that we can really get to a place where we are sharing with an equal lens in a way that it can transcend not only now but over time, right? So I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I'm sure that the few pages that I wrote about this is a little bit more succinct and is broken out within this here. But again, it's been an honor, and I really hope that you gained a lot from checking out this piece here of Harriet's Inconvenient Truths. Take care and keep on doing the great work.